Los que creyeron que después de nuestras victorias militares nos iban a aplastar en el campo de la información, nos iban a aplastar en el campo de la opinión pública, se han encontrado con que la revolución cubana sabe también pelear y ganar batallas en este campo.
Billy Woods is an abstract hip-hop artist from New York.
The reason I'm calling him an artist and not a rapper is because this guy has genuinely become my favorite artist of all time these past few months. Woods has one of the most consistent discographies I have ever laid my eyes upon. And I will say his music isn't for everyone. A lot of people think his flow is offbeat and then he raps like an audiobook, but if you can appreciate good writing, you will appreciate Woods. In these weird abstract beats he raps over, he talks about stuff like religion, traveling, colonialism, mental health, and most importantly for this video, dictatorships. I have to advise y'all though, I know a lot of you are coming from the long-term prior to videos I did before this. This is not that. This is a serious analysis on how this album criticizes the world. There are going to be a lot of serious topics brought up in this, so don't play in my comment section or no shit like that. The album I'm talking about right now is History Will Absolve Me, released in 2012. This was Woods' first album where he genuinely got some traction. I'm super happy it did because the production on here is insane and the writing is even better. But without further ado, let's get right into it. The album opens with a Mis Enemigos, High Tide, which is this weird track that has like water, like sounds in the background. It's pretty weird, but I think it fits Woods' rapping perfectly. I mean, any beat does, unless it's trap. That he would not rap over trap. Fun fact, the sample in the song actually comes from a narcorrido genre, which came from Latin America. It's basically Latino gangster rap without all the I be fucking your bitch, or whatever the hell they do. The title of this album is History Will Absolve Me, which is a quote from Fidel Castro, who was the dictator of Cuba for a while. The opening line on this song is
broke up on impact, I swam from the wreckage, all on the water, oceans of fire, township necklace. Sink or swim now, big waves, I hit him like ow.
This line is a reference to Castro's journey to Cuba aboard some boat which crash landed in a mangrove swamp. This line alone shows you how batshit insane this is going to get, so strap yourself in. The other lines are a reference to South Africa's post-colonial apartheid when it came down to it, with Billy comparing himself to being in the water after the boat, burned. Overall, I don't think there's that much to this opening song, but if there's a song I would consider the album's opener, this is more of a prelude. The next track is where shit really goes downhill. I mean, uphill quality-wise, but you'll get it.
32 bars on how to rob and kill your neighbors. Still got the nerve to ask God to save you. The exhale got a whole different flavor. Official policy, don't do me no favors.
I don't know how to get started. This opening bar, he kind of says to rappers, hey, you rap about killing other people and you really want to ask God to help you and become a Christian? And the exhale line is obviously about weed. Of course, Woods' nickname is Woods, so that's kind of referencing, Backwoods, which is also his label's name. And the policy line is more so him saying, hey, I don't want to do you the burden of repaying you, so just leave me alone. There's this line I want to address that's Oakland Raiders, empire in decline but still got plenty paper, penny wise, pound foolish, bring the mountain to Muhammad, move pound stupid. Now there's a lot of clear references in this line, but I used to think the Pennywise line was referencing like it, but it's not. Of course, Woods references Stephen King's writing a bunch of other times, so it's not that matters, but here he says he's wise with the pennies, but he's pound foolish. You can put those pieces together yourself. He also raps,
problem with the army is they want to be the boss. Problem with secret police is it's like a dirty gun you can't toss.
This line is our first hint of dictatorship on this album, I believe. Of course, except for the, the Fidel Castro line where he crashed his boat. In order to enforce a rule in the country and this dictatorship that is previously mentioned, in the next line he refers to this dictator as President Banana. You had to choose between giving power to an army that could overthrow you, or a secret police that racks up an ever-increasing list of crimes you could eventually pay for. Less repressive forms of government aren't even considered, either because of the nature of the characters involved or because in such a situation, they are literally worthless. Now, President Banana isn't some random nickname. He was the president of Zimbabwe from 1980 to 1987, which is where Woods lived as a child. Zimbabwean culture, and of course Africa in general, is a huge part of Woods' identity as a rapper. The album cover for this album is actually Robert Mugabe, who ended up becoming the first prime minister of Zimbabwe after it turned from Rhodesia into Zimbabwe. All Zimbabweans consider him their best president. I don't have a say in the situation because I'm not Zimbabwean, but I think it's pretty cool that Woods keeps referencing back to his home country in his music. Sea of green under Ray's gamma, thunder shades Ray banner. You will like me when I'm angry, I got plenty of home training and manners. This is a very obvious reference to Bruce Banner, aka the Hulk in Marvel Comics. But at the same time, all these 4 lines are a backwards interpretation of an influential artist. Of course, Ray-Bans are very popular when it comes to Hollywood, but the last 2 lines refer to the artist being completely shallow as a person, not having any anger, so if they do have an outburst in public, it's obviously fake and some kind of publicity stunt. This entire song feels like a diss track, and I could go on for hours about its lyricism and the beat you're hearing playing in the background right now. Oh my god, it's so good. But of course I have to move on because I don't want this video to be 50 hours long.
No holds are barred as they fall in love with a man who lives for adventure.
Facing existential threats, my advice, kill him dead, no regrets. The devil's rejects, writ large. Observe the precepts of a benevolent God. Blue-eyed Prometheans in the heart of darkness.
The opening sample in this song, well, not a song, I think is more of an argument. It's like Woods is trying to argue with the beat. Is I think from some trailer for a movie called Mogambo, which is about some adventure in Africa. And in the trailer, he mentions that Africa was known for centuries as the white man's graveyard. Of course, going back to the theme that, you know, if you're European, your ancestors are probably assholes. I'm gonna keep going over every, first 2 lines of the song because most of the times in these songs, Woods packs most of the meaning into the first 2 lines, so you can just look at those alone and be like, okay, I get what he's getting at here. With the first line, he's basically rapping from the perspective of a colonial official. He's basically saying, oh, we have to kill all the Africans or else, we could lose land. Of course, Woods will never rap about these people in a good way, and I completely understand why, and I completely agree with every single point he's making. And if you don't, you're probably into that weird shit. The second and third lines are talking about how the Europeans tried to convert the Africans to Christianity, and I don't mean like convincing them, I mean straight up forcing them to become Christians, despite some of them having a different belief than they did before, which is extremely weird. And the fourth line is referencing Prometheus, who was a Greek hero who famously stole fire from the gods and brought it to humanity. Here, he's more so saying in a sarcastic tone, I think. Woods is the Prometheus here, and he's bringing culture, civilization, and, everything else to the savages that are the Africans. However, big news, there is a Mexico mentioned in this song. Yeah. Land of the monsters, walk like Quetzalcoatl amongst the conquered. Quetzalcoatl was a figure in the Aztec Empire who was known to be either the god of warfare or fertility. We will never know for sure because those Aztecs were on some freak shit, man. Here he's referring to Hernan Cortez, the famous conqueror of the Aztec Empire. When he initially arrived in Mexico, the Aztecs thought that he was Quetzalcoatl, which, if you think about it, is funny shit. However, it stopped being funny when he used this advantage to lure the Aztecs into a false sense of security. Here, Woods is saying that he's a lot like Cortez in this manner. Once again, rapping from the perspective of a colonizer. In the hook, he raps,
Take up your burden, the savage wars of peace. Fill full the mouth of famine and bid the sickness cease. And when your goal is nearest, the end for others sought. Watch sloth and heathen folly, bring all your hopes to naught.
Well, let's get into this one. These are all a reference to the poem The White Man's Burden by Rudyard Kipling. By the way, The White Man's Burden is going to be a pretty notable point of conversation for the rest of this video, especially in a future song. Kipling wrote this poem as a call for the white man to rise to supposed duty and undertake colonialism as a means to bring civilization unto those of the third world. But instead of doing that, they of course do bad things that I'm not going to get into. Overall, I think this song is just as good as the last. I think it's incredibly well produced and incredibly well written. And on that note, most of this album was produced by Willie Green and Marmaduke. At least the songs that I personally listened to. Both of these producers have been working with Woods for a long ass time, and I really appreciate their work on this album because their songs are always going to be my favorite off of this project, which is also why I think this project is so personal to me, not because I relate to the topic or anything. Hell, it's very alienating to me because I've never been confronted with these types of topics. Of course, yes, I am still young, but learning about how Woods basically lived in the aftermath of an African colony is extremely interesting to hear. The Bandcamp page says, an explosive riot of bitter invective, evocative lyricism, and daisy cutter beats. History Will Absolve Me is a solid hour of hard-boiled anti-nostalgia, and of course the album on streaming isn't the original. There's a lot of different tracks added to it, but I genuinely am so fascinated by this album because of these two songs specifically.
Aging at the edge of an ageless void, too old to be young and too young to be old, or young enough to be paranoid.
Next up is Body of Work, which is way less of a serious song, but still pretty serious in its own regard. It's more of a cipher where we have Massey Bay, I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right, Rock Marciano, who I fucking love by the way, and Woods going back and forth on this beat. There's an MF Doom reference on here that goes,
no metal fingers, but I'm still living on special herbs. Cataloo and cassava.
Special Herbs is the name of the MF Doom album where he's put a bunch of beats on it. I personally have never gotten into those albums, but you can't if you want to. I don't really give a shit. Now, Woods isn't making a living off selling these special herbs, but he is living on them. Now, in Rock Marciano's verse, he says,
I'm feeling exhausted. I pray my sins don't fall upon my offspring.
And in Woods' verse, he continues that by saying,
big ganja, aiming at impalas. They came at dust, wearing balaclavas. You died today for the sins of your fathers.
Which once again, it's pretty obvious to see what that's referring to. There's a bunch of other references in this song, but honestly, I just really like the beat. That's why I wanted to go over this one. And a lot of you know I'm going to miss a lot of things on this album, and there might be some points I overlook when I'm looking at this album. But personally, I don't really give a damn. I just want to talk about albums that I love like this one. Then there's the track DMCA, which is more of a, social commentary track, if anything. I'm going across 4 lines that I absolutely love, because these are simultaneously some of my favorite off the entire record.
We only here cause some crackers ain't wanna pay tax on their Earl Grey, but see nothing wrong with owning slaves, so fuck a sample, I don't got to pay. When I take your shit, that's the American way.
What I like about the lines such as these is that I have met so many goddamn people in my life, and I've met some that are genuinely so blind to what the United States is doing. They will stop at nothing to overglaze this country to the most they can because what, the Second Amendment exists? You're proud of that? I mean, hey, go ahead, you know what I'm saying, but in the first 2 lines, Woods is saying that the United States only exists because the predominantly white colonial patriots didn't want to tax on items like tea. On top of that, Earl Grey, who was mentioned in the second line, is Captain Jean-Luc Picard's, I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right, drink of choice in Star Trek. I'm a Star Wars fan, I don't get into enemy territory like that, so I'm gonna leave that there. However, in these last 2 lines, Woods is saying that they wanted to pay a war over paying taxes themselves, but when someone steals from them, it's a giant problem. So when he takes your shit, that is the American way. I love this bar so much.
You paid the price. You follow orders. Months at a time laying in ambushes by the borders.
Oh, here we go. It's time for Pompeii. Now, Pompeii is, of course, the name of that one city in Italy, I think, that got completely just destroyed. Now, for context for this song, William Tolbert was a Liberian politician who served as the 20th president of Liberia from 1971 until his execution in 1980. Earlier, I mentioned that it could be a risk for these dictators to rely on a powerful army that could overthrow them. That is exactly what happened to Tolbert. The Liberian army overthrew him and ended up executing him. And now I'm going to come back to the white man's burden idea, because this next line says,
white man's burden, Lloyd, my man, white man's burden.
Which is a sample from one of my favorite movies of all time, The Shining. In this scene, he's talking to the hotel's ghost bartender, Lloyd, However, white man's burden is a saying about European or American imperialism, which is linked back to the Rudyard Kipling poem, The White Man's Burden, I've mentioned earlier. This poem was about the deployment of American soldiers overseas to colonize the Philippines. This was a sick fuck idea to whitewash the role of colonization, to kind of twist the idea that you need an empire and that they are doing things for good instead of just, being power hungry. In the song, what says,
You paid the price. You followed orders, months at a time laying in ambushes by the borders. The blunt cackle of gun battles, last breath death rattles, air sucking thump for mortars. Then flames, hideously gorgeous. And when command said find the informants, you followed orders.
Here he is most likely talking about the army that executed Tolbert, or I think he might just be talking about dictators in general. Hell, in countries like Brazil or others, the dictatorship came from the military, so he could be talking to anybody in control of the country right now.
Watching yourself go through the motions, pretending you're not dead, adrift in a black ocean. So imagine the relief when the indictments are finally read. Gray hair on your head.
These lines are referencing the fact that a lot of war criminals and dictators do not see justice for their action decades after they happened. There's a really cool comment about this near the end of the Genius annotation for this line that says, is it even justice if it happens towards the end of someone's lifespan? Which is a great take. At that point, the person's already near the end of their life, so what is the point of having them pay at this point? The chorus goes,
One time is one time, cause that's all it takes to change your life. You've been had it coming, but no worries. The postman always rings twice, thrice. The ghost came, past, present, future. Price on the dome, so chunky anyone could be the shooter. Then lay low as you lie down. Uneasy is the head that rocks the crown.
Even if you follow orders like these, even one time, like killing innocent civilians, what is currently happening in Sudan and other countries, Woods is just saying, don't follow these instructions as a soldier, because you will be put on trial for them. Find a way out of the situation. At least I think so, I'm just kind of assuming here. Woods himself mentioned in an interview that you can really interpret his lyrics in your own way despite them being so specific. You would think he had a specific idea in mind, but most of the time he doesn't. The Postman Always Rings Twice is a 1934 crime novel written by American writer James M. Cain, where in the book he's visited by the ghosts from the book Christmas Carol, except they are the guilt of his crimes returning to haunt him. Of course, linking back to those soldiers that do help execute innocent civilians. There's a handful of other references in the song, but I think I've talked enough about it because this album, especially this song, specifically tells you enough that you need to know. And take it from Woods, somebody that had to live in the aftermath of a world like this. Now for the last song I want to talk about here, it's also the last song on the album. Not initially on its original release, but on its current release, it is the last track. And I don't mind it being that because it's a great one. In the middle of the song, he goes,
Sorry I ain't make the wake. Yeah, I know. $1 short, 24 hours late. Trying to live my whole life in 98. Your mom's watched me clean my plate.
This is actually reference to Alexander Richter's mother, who passed away a few years ago. At least years before this album got released. If you don't know who Alexander Richter is, he is Woods' frequent photographer who I see a lot on Instagram. And if you don't know what the wake is kind of like a funeral. He said he wants to go back in time to a time where he didn't make any terrible mistakes and before he could change things before they negatively affect his life. He also says,
I seen old friends start working with the po-po. Just goes to show I could go back, tell myself everything I know. But me at 23 would probably shrug his shoulder. Put stove to fire like you're preaching to the choir.
What he's saying here is basically, even if he went back and told himself everything he knows, and back then when he could actually use that information, he probably wouldn't even have listened. So it all kind of loops back around. This album ends with a common sample where he says, this music is so much bigger than me, which is a way to put this album, trust me. This album has a very colossal and extremely political and global view of the world, and I really like that. Of course, this album is not for all moods. I could be, trying to study and then I hear Woods going off about some random novel written 2,000 years ago. I'm trying to study for my goddamn Latin test. Can you leave me alone? But every time this album comes on, I just get to smile because this music makes me think, and I really enjoy that. This album is hip-hop in another kind of way. Of course, less melodic, way less mainstream, but at the same time, I've learned more from this album than I ever will from my goddamn history class, so there's that. I want to make a quick conclusion here so you understand what I think of this album. I think this album is genuinely amazing. I first heard it back this summer, and man, that morning walk while listening to this album, it's just great. For 2012, this is extremely futuristic in terms of like abstract hip-hop. This is before Yeezus came out, and that formed fucking thousands of artists, including, you know, one of my goats, JPEG Mafia. Well, I don't know, maybe I'll make a video on his stuff later. Woods has so many albums I can make so many hours of videos on, it's insane. I've been SoPow, and this has been it. Bye.